Welcome to the Further Light Podcast, presented by Wisconsin Freemasonry, helping you accomplish your Masonic goals through education and more light. And now, I present to you, Brother Chris Ludke.
Listeners, scholars, brothers, this is Brother Chris Ludke, and today I want to explore the trowel. Now, we've looked at a lot of the working tools. I tend to like to take a look at them individually, sometimes grouping them up when I'm dealing with the last of that set of tools. And one of the ones that we tend to overlook a lot is the trowel. I mean, we have the symbols that are out there. Every lodge probably has a gold trowel with some working implements etched into it or a name etched into it, and yet it's not something we discuss more than the one time it turns up in the degrees. But this emblem is very much like a key. While in and of itself it would appear to be insignificant, it tends to open up matters that are vastly more important than we would expect. To pursue its teachings through all their ramifications would probably require a book. So there are going to be things that I mentioned today that we aren't going to dig deep into because I'm trying to keep to the grand jurisdiction in which I'm in. There is no need to say that of all the working tools, it is the most appropriate to the Master Mason. It carries that significance on its surface. The entered apprentice, who can only make a beginning at the task of shaping the ashlar, needs only the gavel and the gauge. The fellow craft, to bring the stone into completeness of size and form, requires the plumb, the square, and the level. But the Master Mason's task is to set the finished stone in its place and to bind it there, for which purpose the trowel is his most necessary tool. Now let's start at the beginning, as Socrates would love us to do. Let's define our terms. Now, according to Mackey, always going back to Mackey, the trowel is an implement of operative masonry which has been adopted for the use by speculative masons. By this implement and its use in operative masonry to spread the cement, which binds all the parts of a building into one common mass, we are taught to spread the cement of affection and kindness, which unites all the members of the Masonic family, wheresoever dispersed over the globe, into one companionship of brotherly love. And an old custom in an Oxford lodge gave it prominence as a jewel, and as a symbol it goes back to practices in the ancient, although we'll see that's kind of questionable. But Mackey is working with the material he has. We have more complete records today. Today, this implement is considered the appropriate working tool of a Master Mason because at the end of the day, it is necessary that he binds his work together. A theme that we're going to be looking at quite a bit. A Master Mason, having examined their correctness and proved themselves true and trusty, secures them permanently in place by spreading, with the trowel, the cement that irrevocably binds these stones together. In terms of history, surprisingly, there's almost no mention of the trowel in the earliest known Scottish or English Masonic documents, which date to the late 17th century all the way up to the 1730s. Even Samuel Pritchard's Masonry Dissected and Three Distinct Knocks, 1730 and 1760 respectively, completely ignore the use of the trowel. At best, trowels are mentioned in the historical account of the Dumfries manuscript in 1710 without any mention of a symbolic or ritual dimension. And we see one mention in 1726 in the Grand Mystery laid open that indicates that a Freemason uses two tools, the hammer to separate and the trowel to join, and we'll get back to that in a minute. The situation was much the same on the continent. In France and more generally the French-speaking area, as well as Germany, the trowel is absent before about 1744. Even after that date, the majority of rituals continued to ignore it, such as the Ritual de Deschartres, the Ritual des Marquis de Gages, 1763, and the rituals of the strict Templar observance, the French Rite, about 1785. So we're not really seeing the trowel in active use. We do, however, begin to see it in French ritual. The first mention of the trowel is found in a very strange 1744 disclosure known as Le Parfait Mécant, which reveals the secrets of entered apprentices, fellow crafts, master masons, and Scottish masters in a highly unusual form, quite different from all known Masonic ritual. In this ritual, the master of the lodge wears a square and a trowel on his collar, and after the oath of a new entered apprentice, he takes the trowel with which he pretends to mix mortar in a trough and then passes it over the apprentice's lips to symbolically seal them. Not something that we would see today. That being said, it is interesting that the trowel keeps turning up and it's almost trying to find a place. But if you remember back to the episode we did in the spring of 24 on the history of the degrees, it does make sense because the Master Mason is still developing as we're moving through the 1730s, the 1740s. Now, in some places, it's used as a tiler's tool or a tool by the inner guard. The trowel would be used as a tiler's implement for a time in English, Irish, and many Commonwealth lodges. There's even mention of it in New Zealand. It was also used in some jurisdictions as a sharp implement. So let's look at some interpretations. And here I've got three that are related. The first is unity. This is the most obvious. The trowel is an emblem of completion. The final stage of a job is reached when mortar is applied to bind the stones together, or when plaster is applied over a wall, thereby obscuring the differences between the stones. It is in this sense that the trowel is appropriated to the Master Mason as his chief working tool to spread the cement that binds together the stones that are rough-hewn by the hammer and chisel and tested by the square, level, and plumb. Thus, symbolically, the master of the lodge is the cement that unites the brethren and binds them together in peace, harmony, and brotherly love, really this idea of the mystic tie. So again, getting back to that idea of the trowel taking the individual and making them something greater. And that's something that we're going to get into a little bit more in a moment. Secondly, we have this idea of the gavel to separate and the trowel to join. The gavel represents passion, the capacity to introduce energy into a situation. The force of conscience enables a Freemason to shape himself from a rough ashlar by separating all the vain or unbecoming thoughts, the superfluous thoughts and vices that we might have, to reveal a perfect ashlar, able to take his place as a contributing member of society. The trowel then allows us to reassemble those pieces to create a grand edifice, a building or structure whose beauty greatly surpasses the sum of the individual parts, which were assembled to create it. It's really a reflection of society. Yes, everyone can improve themselves to a degree, but then we have to work together as a society to do something more with it. It requires patience and effort to use the trowel correctly to build. Yet, as a tool, is utterly useless if the parts with which it is creating the building are not correctly shaped and ready for their proper use. This is the balance between the individual and the society. The individual must function to improve society, not the other way around. This transformation combined the acquisition of practical skills with character development to enable a Freemason to become part of that building which is not made with human hands, eternal in the heavens, getting at this idea of the gavel being really the opposite of the trowel. The gavel necessarily separates. It necessarily chips away at the stone, whereas the trowel is used to bring stones together. But we can't be prepared to be part of that larger edifice, part of society, if we don't work on ourselves. So it does become very much that balance. Now, Matt Gallagher in Practical Freemasonry goes a little bit further. And he's looking at this as a tool referring to us serving something greater than ourselves or becoming something greater than ourselves. To him, a structure is necessarily greater than the sum of its parts. Each piece must work together, supporting each other to create a greater whole. Okay, nothing really different from unity at this point. Stones are built in a staggered fashion. And these walls, if you think of the Parthenon in Athens or any stone wall, even the Temple of Solomon, would have built with one level of stones and the next level is staggered. So the stone is centered over the seam left by the two stones beneath it. So any stone should touch 6 other stones, 2 beneath, 1 on either side, and 2 above. The 2 beneath represent brothers who support us, who check in on us, who are those that are there when trouble calls. These are the brothers that you tend to reach out to. And in every lodge, every brother hopefully has those people. If you don't, then that's something that you probably want to look into. We've seen, for example, presentations on loneliness, of male loneliness, and the problems that it causes, and we need those supports beneath us. The stones to either side are on the same plane. These are brothers in your stage of life, with whom you can discuss issues of your life or theirs with greater understanding since you have common experience. You can look at them and say, hey, you're of my generation. Yes, those stones that support are going to be older. They're going to be the people that I can ask questions of what worked 20 years ago. Because these are people who have been through the experience. The 2 next to us are people who are going through the experience now. And so you're going to see those generational shifts, those technological changes, those alterations in society that come with every generation. They're going to reflect that. The stones above are brothers you support, those that may look to you for advice and support. Now, this may be an issue. Maybe you're the youngest member in the lodge, but you're not going to be in that position forever. There will be new members who come in after you who will look to you for advice. And these are brothers who you will check in on, support, and mentor as they go through Masonry. It is the duty of a Mason not just to make more Masons or to improve ourselves, but rather is our duty to mentor the next generation coming in, to assist them in becoming good brethren, in taking these good men and making them better. The Trowel, therefore, teaches us that we have a role, and to fail to participate for the betterment of the group will result in a weaker structure. We must play our role if the fraternity, or society at large, is to prosper. This is in part acceptance and in part recognizing the larger hierarchy. Today, oftentimes, people sit there and say, well, society exists to help me. And to some degree, for some people, it does. But in Masonry, we usually look at it differently. We believe that we must exist for the larger society, that we are doing well, and we must take that wealth, be it time, resources, knowledge, whatever it is, and we must share it to create stronger families, communities, and society overall. Now, what about practical application? Well, in many parts of the world, of all the working tools is the trowel, which seems to be the most appropriate to this degree. Again, the entered apprentice who can only make a beginning at the task of shaping the ashlar needs only the gavel and the 24-inch gauge. The fellow craft needs to bring that stone into completeness of size and form. And to do that, to make those careful measurements, to make sure that the perfect ashlar really is a perfect ashlar, or as close as you can get, requires the plumb, the square, and the level. Tools to ensure that something really is perfect. The Master Mason's task is to set the finished stone in its place, to bind it in there, for which purpose the trowel is his tool. Therefore, the Master Mason has been given this trowel because it is most symbolic of his function within the great work of temple building. When that tool has done its work, there's nothing more to do because the structure stands complete, a united mass incapable of collapse or falling apart. The stones, which were many, have now, because of the binding power of cement, become one. If the stone represents an individual man, and if the temple represents the fraternity as a whole, it is evident that the trowel is the symbol of that which has power to bind men together. The trowel has been and still is a respected working tool in the craft throughout much of the world. And even though we may not use it ourselves nearly as much as we see elsewhere, it may still provide us with much symbolism on which to moralize. After all, one of the great quests of Masonry is to become universal, is to teach these very universal lessons to others, to bring societies closer together. We saw that with the American experiment, the Constitution, for example. We see those Masonic ideas within it. And that need to unify a society to help people come together is really one of the primary goals of Masonry since time immemorial. So, what power can unite the scattered people and nations of the earth, especially in times like today, when they are more than ever hindered by passion and hatred? Surely, if the spirit and influence of brotherhood can call together 1 to 2 million men out of all classes and localities of America and can bind them into a solidarity of a great united order, that same power can accomplish similar results if applied to the world at large. Diplomats and politicians do not seem to believe it, but it is true nonetheless. Trite as it may sound, Freemasonry's benign genius of fraternity was never more badly needed on earth than it is now. That trowel becomes increasingly important. Every device has been used to bind people together. Force, money, fear, superstition. Let us hope that sooner or later, the race, the society, will try the means proved so effective by more than 200 years, or 300 years now, of Freemasonry. At the end of the day, the trowel is a reminder of unification, of brotherhood. It's a reminder that while you may disagree with someone in the lodge, you can still go out and share a beverage with them after. It is a reminder that we came together as brothers and we should remain together as brothers. It is a reminder of all those things that happen when people begin to separate, when people begin to look at others as an enemy. And it reminds us of our role as Masons to try and bring people together in any way that we can. All that leaves is for me to thank you for joining me, Brother Chris Leakey, and the entire Further Light team on your quest to find more light through Masonry.
Are you interested in learning more about Freemasonry in Wisconsin? Visit wisconsinmasons.org to learn more about Masonry and access further educational content and more light. Once again, that address is wimasons.org. Any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email us at education@wisconsinmasons.org. And thank you for listening.